Lucia Butler's red scarf was still draped over her shoulder when she vanished from Chicago on the damp, cold night of November 2008. The city shivered in the winter wind, blowing through the empty streets of the North Side. At 12:40 a.m., the camera at Lincoln Hall captured Lucia stepping out of the bar, a fleeting smile fading into the darkness. The security guard clearly remembered the bright red scarf standing out against the night like the last streak of color he saw. 35 minutes later, a camera at the CTA Belmont station showed a female figure with a red scarf walking with three unfamiliar young men. What happened in that brief window of time would haunt Chicago for a decade. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. Chicago was entering the late fall to early winter, the damp cold of November 2008 seeping through the streets, soaking into the old bricks of redstone buildings and coating car windows with mist. The Lakeview East area, as night fell, buzzed with neon lights from crowded bars and restaurants, laughter mixing with live music spilling out from Lincoln Hall, a popular spot for Chicago's youth. That evening, Lucia Butler, a 22-year-old senior at DePaul University, left her small apartment near Belmont Avenue to meet friends at Lincoln Hall. She was a slender girl with bright eyes, brown hair often tied back neatly, and was known for wearing a distinctive red checkered scarf that her friends recognized as her signature. Around 12:40 a.m., as the show ended, security footage from Lincoln Hall captured Lucia stepping outside, looking normal, a brief smile crossing her face as she waved goodbye to friends. Her group quickly caught taxis to head home, leaving Lucia lingering on the sidewalk for a few minutes. The night shift security guard distinctly recalled the young woman with the red scarf chatting with a group of 6 strangers, 4 men and 2 women, who seemed to have come from another nearby bar. One stood out in his memory, a young man in a dark green jacket with a Chicago Cubs logo. A taxi driver waiting at the corner also reported seeing Lucia standing close to the curb, appearing hesitant about whether to head home or continue with the group of strangers. These small details became the final pieces of Lucia's journey. By around 1:15 a.m., security footage at the CTA Belmont station, a few blocks from Lincoln Hall, captured a grainy image of a girl with a red scarf walking beside 3 young men. The station's dim fluorescent lights only illuminated a few fleeting seconds, the footage grainy, but the familiar red scarf led police to later confirm it was Lucia. That was the last time she was seen. When dawn broke, her small apartment on Belmont Avenue remained eerily quiet. Lucia's bed was untouched from when she left, her phone had been off since the middle of the night, and her personal belongings were undisturbed. Her mother, Janet Butler, called repeatedly but only heard the ring fade into silence. Her roommate, returning that morning, was stunned to find Lucia hadn't come home, something that had never happened before. Worry turned to fear, tension gripping the Butler family. They tried calling one last time, then at 8 a.m., they were forced to dial 911, reporting that their daughter had vanished into Chicago's cold night. As soon as the report was logged, the Chicago Police Department's morning shift began processing the case. Initially, it was classified as an adult missing person case. Per protocol, police typically wait 24 to 48 hours to see if an adult returns voluntarily. However, details provided by the family shifted their perspective. Lucia had no history of running away, no mental health issues, no signs of planning to abandon her life, and crucially, her phone had gone dead abruptly that night. The duty team deemed it a high-risk case and mobilized patrol units immediately. The investigation's first steps were launched urgently. One task force went straight to Lucia's apartment, photographing the scene and collecting personal items for comparison, confirming she showed no signs of planning a trip. Clothes, money, and passport were all untouched. Simultaneously, another team contacted the friends who had been with Lucia at Lincoln Hall the previous night. All their statements aligned. Lucia left the bar around 12:40 a.m. as her friends took taxis home. She stayed outside a few minutes longer, saying she'd head back later. Police reviewed security footage from Lincoln Hall's entrance, confirming the accounts. Lucia stood outside, wearing her familiar red scarf. However, investigators quickly uncovered an unexplainable gap between 12:40 a.m. and 1:15 a.m. when the CTA Belmont camera recorded a girl with a red scarf walking with three young men. No one knew where Lucia was, what she did, or who she met. This 30-minute gap became the case's first and biggest question mark. To find answers, police urgently gathered footage from every possible source. They contacted a convenience store on Lincoln Avenue, requesting recorded tapes, scoured nearby parking lots, and obtained recordings from the CTA operator for the relevant time frame. Some footage showed groups of young people passing by, but dim lighting and grainy images made identification nearly impossible. Still, the Belmont station footage stood out, a petite girl with the distinctive red scarf walking beside three young men, descending the station stairs. That was the last recorded image matching Lucia's description. Witness statements began to add more pieces. A taxi driver waiting near Lincoln Hall clearly recalled Lucia standing with a group of 6 strangers, including a young man in a dark green jacket with a Chicago Cubs logo on the left chest. This detail was noted in the initial report as a potential identifier. A Lincoln Hall security guard also confirmed seeing Lucia chatting comfortably with the group, showing no signs of coercion. Lucia's roommate told police that Lucia had never stayed out overnight without notice, never skipped classes, or cut contact with family. With all these details, the initial investigation solidified the likelihood of Lucia voluntarily disappearing was extremely low. The duty officer's report ended with a concise but heavy line. The victim likely encountered an incident shortly after leaving Lincoln Hall. In their hands were 3 fragile leads, a discarded red scarf, a mysterious group of young people with a detail about a Cubs jacket, and an unexplained 30-minute gap. But these would form the foundation for the investigation to take shape and expand. From these faint pieces, police knew their next steps couldn't stay on paper. They needed to return to where Lucia was last seen to search for any physical traces that might unravel the mystery. That same morning, another Chicago PD unit was dispatched to Lincoln Hall for a more detailed search of the scene. The previous night, the bar had been packed with trash, plastic cups, and bottle caps still scattered around the entrance. Investigators set up temporary barriers, instructing bar staff to preserve the scene. They started with the basics: trash bins along the alley behind the bar, areas where people often smoked, and the cramped parking lot out back. Every trash bag was pulled out, opened, and meticulously inspected. Amid Heineken bottles, crumpled napkins, and half-eaten pizza boxes, they searched for anything tied to Lucia Butler. Moments later, a young officer's gaze locked onto something glinting red beneath the damp trash. It was a scarf, thin, slightly frayed wool, mixed with street dust and the smell of cigarette smoke. The team leader immediately recognized it. This was the red scarf every witness had described. The scarf wasn't in the dark alley like a casually lost item, but near the path leading toward Clark Street, a direction opposite Lucia's route home. At the scene, forensic specialists photographed and sealed the scarf in an evidence bag. They carefully examined the surrounding area. The damp ground showed several unfamiliar shoe prints, size 10, 11, with a herringbone sole pattern, not matching the small athletic shoes Lucia typically wore. A few dark fabric fibers were also noted, clinging to the edge of a trash bin, possibly from someone's jacket or pants. Additionally, they found a long brown hair caught on a rusty nail in a wooden door in the alley. All samples were meticulously collected, accompanied by detailed reports. However, 2008's technological limitations meant the forensic team couldn't analyze them deeply on the spot. They could only store the samples, logging them into the CODIS system, hoping future advancements would aid in identifying DNA or fingerprints. Piecing together the evidence, police faced a troubling possibility. The scarf's location on Clark Street suggested Lucia may have been approached or even forced to deviate from her usual route. The scarf, typically snug around her neck, wouldn't have fallen off easily unless there was a struggle or external force. The lead investigator noted in the report, "It's highly likely the victim was led away from the Lincoln Hall area by unknown individuals." The evidence location suggests coercion or at least imposition. To bolster this theory, they expanded the search. The parking lot behind the bar was scoured foot by foot. In daylight, tire tracks overlapped chaotically. Hard to distinguish, but some unusually deep impressions suggested a vehicle had left in a hurry. A witness, a morning shift janitor, reported seeing a group of young people rushing toward the parking lot around 1 a.m., laughing loudly, but he didn't note specifics. This aligned with the time of Lucia's disappearance. Police retrieved footage from a convenience store at the Clark Street intersection. The screen was blurry, but it seemed to show a dark-colored SUV moving away from the area just after 1 a.m. The image was too dark to read the license plate, but the vehicle's direction was confirmed toward Lake Michigan. All data was logged in the report, and police concluded Lucia may have entered or been taken into this vehicle. Finding the red scarf wasn't just the first physical evidence. It was a turning point, shifting the case from a possible voluntary disappearance to likely criminal intervention. Chicago PD officially upgraded the case to a criminal investigation. The initial pieces, though scattered, all pointed one way: Lucia didn't leave alone. As the red scarf was placed in an evidence bag, tension spread through the precinct's interview room, as everyone understood they were facing a case far graver than initially assumed. From that moment, the investigation's focus was no longer a routine missing person case, but a mission to uncover the truth in the fleeting minutes of that night. The red scarf found near Clark Street forced investigators to reconstruct every minute of Lucia Butler's movements that fateful night. From 12:40 a.m., when Lincoln Hall's camera captured her leaving the bar with friends, to the final moment at the CTA Belmont station, less than an hour passed, filled with unexplainable gaps. The police started from the beginning. Lucia stood outside Lincoln Hall, clutching a small purse, her red scarf wrapped around her neck. The camera at the entrance showed her exchanging a few words with a security guard before turning toward Clark Street instead of heading straight to her apartment on Belmont Avenue. At 12:50 a.m., a convenience store's security camera on Clark Street captured a girl with a red scarf walking with three young men. The footage was blurry, but Lucia's gait and the distinctive scarf were unmistakable. In the brief seconds of the clip, one of the three men wore a dark green jacket, matching the taxi driver's description. This bolstered the theory that the group of strangers approached her right after she left Lincoln Hall. About 10 minutes later, near 1 a.m., a camera in a parking lot beside Clark Street recorded a group of 4 people hurrying toward the CTA Belmont station. The red scarf's silhouette blended into the dim yellow streetlights, and Lucia's steps seemed slower than those of her companions. This detail caught the investigators' attention. Was she being coerced, or simply following new acquaintances? The most critical truth lay in the phone data. When police extracted information from the carrier, they found Lucia's phone disconnected from the cell tower at 1:19 a.m., near the Belmont station. This was pivotal, as it aligned with the moment the CTA station camera captured a female figure with a red scarf entering the lobby with 3 men at 1:15 a.m. Just minutes later, all signals from Lucia vanished. The phone shutting off completely couldn't be dismissed as random. Either the battery died, or someone deliberately turned it off to avoid tracking. In the investigation file, police noted clearly, the time frame from 12:40 to 1:20 a.m. on November 15, 2008, is the critical window. All traces converge at the final point of the CTA Belmont station. Piecing together the data, a precise picture emerged. 12:40 a.m. Lucia left Lincoln Hall. 12:50 a.m. She appeared on Clark Street with 3 young men. Near 1 a.m. The group moved toward Belmont. 1:15 a.m. The CTA camera confirmed their entry. 1:19 a.m. Lucia's phone went dead. After that, no further clues surfaced. This led investigators to conclude that the disconnection occurred in or immediately after she entered the CTA station, likely directly tied to her disappearance. The camera evidence, taxi driver's testimony, and phone data aligned for the first time, forming a coherent but closed timeline, a journey of less than 40 minutes that led Lucia into the dark. Veteran officers reading the report shared a heavy feeling without external intervention. A healthy 22-year-old student, dressed in a coat and scarf, couldn't vanish in just a few steps in downtown Chicago. The clear timeline gave them a framework, but also posed a paradox. Why, among dozens of CTA cameras, was there only one frame confirming Lucia? And what really happened in the minutes after 1:19 a.m., when the phone went offline and all traces faded? This question haunted the entire team, forcing them to shift their full focus to the Belmont station, the final point in Lucia Butler's timeline. With the timeline established, the CTA Belmont station became the investigation's epicenter. But to identify those standing beside Lucia Butler in her final moments, police had to explore every possibility. They started with those closest to the victim, close friends, DePaul classmates, and an ex-boyfriend. Within the first 48 hours, relentless interviews took place at Chicago PD headquarters. Some friends confirmed they left Lincoln Hall earlier than Lucia, with solid alibis, dorm entry cameras, taxi receipts, and even phone signals, placing them elsewhere during the critical time frame. Lucia's ex-boyfriend, mentioned by the family due to past conflicts, was also scrutinized. He lived in Wicker Park, and apartment cameras and neighbor witnesses confirmed he was home all night on November 14th. The file was signed off. No grounds to suspect close friends or ex-boyfriend. All have solid alibis. With the inner circle ruled out, investigators returned to the blurry images from Clark Street and the Belmont station. The three young men with Lucia. These faces remained unidentified. The only evidence beyond the cameras was the taxi driver's account of the dark green jacket with a Chicago Cubs logo on the left chest. Police isolated frames from the convenience store camera, zooming in as much as possible, but the quality only revealed a figure in a green jacket with no clear logo. Still, this detail became the sole clue to visualize the group. Investigators hypothesized that this wasn't a meticulously planned act. If someone had targeted Lucia, there would likely be signs of prior stalking or preparation. But the evidence suggested the group approached her spontaneously after she left Lincoln Hall. The red scarf left on Clark Street hinted at a possible minor struggle, but not enough to draw attention from passers-by. This led police to lean toward a theory: this was likely an opportunistic abduction. These individuals saw a young woman alone at night, decided to approach, and the situation quickly spiraled out of control. The first week's reports repeatedly emphasized the spontaneous situation factor. The lead investigator wrote, "No signs Lucia was followed before leaving Lincoln Hall. No threatening messages, no major conflicts with friends or family. The perpetrator likely encountered her by chance and acted impulsively." However, identifying the young men hit a dead end. Chicago is a vast city, and Cubs jackets were so common that tens of thousands owned one. Police interviewed Lincoln Hall staff, nearby vendors on Clark Street, and taxi drivers in the area, but no one could provide more precise information. A few witnesses vaguely recalled a noisy group of young people, but none could describe faces. In internal meetings, many officers voiced concerns. If this was indeed a random group, the chances of finding them after days had passed were slim. They could be students from another school, out-of-town visitors, or not even Chicago residents. Each hour that passed blurred the trail further. Still, investigators clung to the scant pieces. They cross-referenced Belmont station cameras with cell tower data around the area, hoping to find other devices that went offline or moved in sync with Lucia. They also posted flyers across the neighborhood, calling for anonymous tips. A formal investigation was launched, titled "3 Unidentified Suspects Potentially Linked to Lucia Butler's Disappearance." As local media began covering the story, the public fixated on the Cubs jacket detail, seeing it as a haunting symbol of the case. But internally, investigators knew they were still facing a thick fog. No confirmed identities for the young men, no license plates, no reliable DNA evidence, only a fragile theory of an opportunistic abduction on a winter night. Knowing that relying solely on a red scarf and blurry camera footage could lead the case to a dead end, investigators decided to expand the search scope within the next week. K-9 units were deployed, with trained dogs brought to the areas around Lincoln Hall, Clark Street, and the CTA Belmont station. One dog immediately picked up a scent from the scarf and led straight toward a parking lot near the Belmont station. There, the trail seemed to stop. The dog circled several times before losing direction. The report noted, scent trail terminated at parking lot adjacent to Belmont station. This led police to believe Lucia may have been put into a vehicle in the lot, then left the area without leaving further traces. Undeterred, the search team shifted to locations that might conceal evidence. Patrol boats were deployed on Lake Michigan, particularly near Diversey Harbor, just a few miles from Belmont. The icy November waters made the search grueling, but nothing was found beyond debris and floating wood. Meanwhile, other teams scoured Lincoln Park, a known hotspot for nighttime robberies. They moved in rows, flipping through bushes and shining flashlights into every corner. The results were still zero. Not overlooking any routes, the team also secured CTA permission to access the train tracks running through Belmont. The reasoning: if Lucia or her companions left the station via the tracks, cameras might not have captured it. For 2 consecutive nights, police followed the tracks north and south. They found a few old shoe prints in the gravel, but analysis showed they didn't match women's sizes. Critical evidence remained absent. Amid seemingly hopeless efforts, a new lead emerged from the community. A resident on Belmont Avenue, less than 2 blocks from the station, called the hotline. She reported hearing an argument around 1 a.m. on November 15th, a woman's voice mixed with several male voices. When she looked out her window, she only saw vague figures in the streetlight, too unclear to identify. She didn't report it at the time, thinking it was just drunken youths. But news of the disappearance jogged her memory. This testimony was logged, added to the file, and chillingly matched the 1:15 a.m. time frame when the Belmont camera recorded Lucia with the 3 young men entering the station. Though vague, investigators saw this as supporting evidence for their theory. Lucia did not go willingly with the group. A brief argument could signal resistance before she was forced to leave a safe area. However, the lack of a witness clearly seeing faces meant this testimony served only as a guide, not strong enough for action. The late November 2008 summary report stated, all expanded search efforts, K-9, Lake Michigan, Lincoln Park, CTA tracks, have yielded no concrete results. The only additional lead comes from a witness hearing an argument. The case risks stalling. This harsh reality weighed heavily on the team. They had mobilized dozens of officers, searched through countless nights, but were no closer to answers. For the Butler family, every scrap of information was a flicker of hope. But for the police, they knew the Lucia Butler case was sliding from an urgent search into a long-term missing person file, where each passing day meant fainter traces. By November 2009, as Chicago's cold winter winds returned, the Lucia Butler disappearance case turned 1 year old. Hopes that expanded searches would bring a breakthrough had not materialized. No specific suspects were identified, no new evidence emerged, and community volunteer efforts dwindled. At Chicago PD headquarters, the investigation room officially closed the file and transferred it to the cold case unit, marking a turning point. Lucia Butler's case was no longer an urgent priority, but one of hundreds of unsolved missing person cases in the city. In the archives, the scant evidence was carefully packed. The red scarf, dark fabric fibers from the Clark Street alley, a long brown hair caught on a nail, faint shoe prints in the parking lot, and numerous blurry security tapes. All were sealed, labeled, and stored in the cold case unit's metal cabinets. At the time, DNA analysis technology was still limited. The collected samples were too small for comparative profiling. CODIS, the national DNA database, was checked multiple times, but always returned the same result. No hit. Video footage was backed up in multiple copies, but the quality barely improved, even with digital enhancement. The figure in the dark green Cubs jacket remained a hazy blur. Veteran investigator Mark Ellison, who followed the case from the start, wrote in his final memo before handing it off. No CODIS hit, no specific suspects. The only leads remained the 3 unidentified young men and a time gap from 12:50 to 1:20 a.m. Until technology advances or new witnesses emerge, the case will remain stalled. For the next year, the Butler family repeatedly called for updates, hoping for progress. But the police response was always the same: "We're still monitoring." In reality, the case was shelved, only revisited for specific reasons. Old press releases about Lucia faded from local papers, and Chicago, overwhelmed with new cases, largely forgot the DePaul student who vanished in the winter of 2008. In the cold case unit, Lucia Butler's file sat on a shelf among hundreds of thick folders. On its spine, a chilling label: "Missing person. High risk. Status. Cold." For the officers who worked the initial investigation, seeing that file lie dormant was a bitter failure. They had scoured Lincoln Park, Lake Michigan, and CTA tracks, but everything led to nothing. Internally, Lucia's case was sometimes cited as a textbook example of evidence fragility. A scarf, a few traces, and footage too blurry to act on shaped the entire investigation. No matching DNA, no license plates, no faces clear enough for wanted posters. The case slipped into obscurity, becoming a ripple in the city's memory and a painful void for the Butler family. In the cold case unit, Lucia's file was meticulously preserved, awaiting a day when new technology, data, or an unexpected tip might revive it. But by late 2009, all that remained was silence. Lucia Butler, 22, DePaul student, still hadn't returned. And Chicago, despite its clamor of new cases, let her story fade into oblivion, as if it never happened. When Lucia Butler's file sat dormant in the cold case unit's metal cabinets between 2010 and 2012, young investigators were periodically assigned to review the old evidence. They focused mainly on the fragile DNA samples, the brown hair on the alley nail, the dark fabric fibers on the trash bin, and traces from the red scarf. Each time, new analysis technology was updated in the system, technicians resubmitted the data to CODIS, hoping for a hit linking to another crime. Yet, report after report returned the same cold result: no match found. Over 3 years, at least 4 submissions were made with increasingly higher resolution, but no viable results emerged. The DNA samples were too weak, or the person who left them had no prior record, leaving the national system unable to provide a match. While police worked quietly, the Butler family tirelessly kept the case alive in local media. They appeared in Chicago Tribune, ABC7, and WGN9 reports, pleading for public tips. Memorials were held every November, with friends and family lighting candles on Belmont Avenue, near the CTA station where Lucia vanished. But alongside this came countless false tips and calls that wasted investigative time. Some claimed to have seen Lucia in New York, others said she joined a secretive cult, and there were even rumors she fled with a secret boyfriend. All were debunked as delusions or fabrications. Police had to log every call, only to cross them out, adding more pages to a file thick with words but empty of meaning. Cold case investigators admitted the case had hit a wall. No matching DNA, no new witnesses, no technology at the time capable of clarifying the blurry videos. Internally, the department began viewing Lucia Butler as a case file frozen, completely stalled. Without an unexpected breakthrough, it would remain buried in the archives. The family, though exhausted, persisted. Lucia's mother regularly sent letters, made calls, and ensured her daughter's name appeared in local media at least a few times a year, as a way to cling to memory before it faded entirely. The 2012 year-end report's dry note reaffirmed reality. No CODIS hit. All tips checked. No value. No identified suspects. Case remains frozen. For the Butler family, each word was another cut into their despair. For Chicago police, it was just one of hundreds of unsolved cases. But in the small community around Belmont, Lucia's silhouette with her red scarf lingered as an unresolved mystery that never slept. In early 2015, over 7 years after Lucia Butler's disappearance faded into silence, an unexpected event jolted the long-dormant case. On Reddit, specifically the Raw Unresolved Mysteries subreddit, an anonymous user posted a summary of the entire case, including links to old Chicago Tribune articles. The post quickly drew hundreds of comments. Many had never heard of Lucia, but were captivated by the mystery of the red scarf, the unexplainable 30-minute gap, and the blurry CTA Belmont footage. Among the participants, one user claimed to have attended DePaul with Lucia. He dug through old Facebook photos and found one posted in November 2008, days after her disappearance. The photo, taken inside Lincoln Hall, showed 6 young people holding beers, laughing for the camera. What stunned the community was the background. At the frame's edge, a female figure with the familiar red scarf, her face partially visible, but enough for classmates to confirm it was Lucia Butler. This matched the exact time and place of her last sighting. More crucially, the 6 faces in the foreground became the focal point. Who were they? Were they the 3 young men recorded on Clark Street and at Belmont? The photo spread rapidly, not just on Reddit but across Twitter and Facebook groups about crimes and disappearances. Internet users began cropping, zooming, and comparing every face in the image. Some claimed a young man in a green jacket matched the Cubs jacket description from the taxi driver. Others dug into Facebook friend lists, identifying names of tagged accounts. The online community split tasks. Some researched DePaul's 2008 records. Others tracked down the music event at Lincoln Hall on November 14th. The photo's virality put pressure on the Chicago Police Department. Dozens of emails, messages, and calls flooded the hotline, demanding CPD reopen the Lucia Butler case immediately. Some users sent copies of the photo with their analyses to the cold case unit. Initially, police were skeptical, dismissing it as internet noise. But when local media joined in, with headlines like "Internet Sleuths Uncover New Photo of 2008 Missing Student," CPD could no longer ignore it. In a May 2015 internal meeting, Lucia Butler's file was officially brought back to the discussion table. The Facebook photo was printed, enlarged, and pinned on a whiteboard beside frames from the Belmont and Clark Street cameras. Veteran investigator Mark Ellison, though retired, was invited to consult. He admitted, "If this photo was truly taken the night Lucia disappeared, those 6 people are witnesses, possibly suspects, we never identified." Internet sleuths, with their collective power, had done what police couldn't for years: breathe new life into a frozen case. Though not yet legal evidence, the photo opened an entirely new investigative path, and most importantly, forced CPD to revisit a case the Butler family had never abandoned. In June 2015, just weeks after the Facebook photo stirred a storm on Reddit, the Chicago PD's cold case unit officially pulled Lucia Butler's file from storage. A brief but resounding internal memo was issued. Case reopened. Butler, Lucia, Missing Persons 2008. The thick, sealed files, untouched for 7 years, were placed back on the investigators' meeting table. The photo with 6 unfamiliar faces and Lucia's silhouette in the background became the catalyst that made the unit take action. This time, police resolved to use the most advanced tools, unavailable in 2008, from cutting-edge DNA analysis to facial recognition technology. The first step was reviewing all preserved evidence. The red scarf, brown hair, dark fabric fibers, and faint shoe prints were sent straight to the Illinois State Crime Lab. Most critical were the DNA samples from the hair and fabric. In 2008, technology wasn't advanced enough to analyze them. By 2015, a new method called STR-Mix was in use. STR-Mix, a software for analyzing mixed DNA, could isolate genetic traces from multiple sources in tiny samples. Forensic experts carefully unsealed the evidence, ran it through STR mix, and weeks later, preliminary results returned to the cold case unit. The report grabbed the team's attention. While the DNA wasn't enough for absolute identification, it revealed a set of genetic markers with high statistical value. In other words, they had a piece strong enough for genealogical DNA analysis, an emerging method comparing markers to expanded genealogical databases. Even if it didn't pinpoint an individual, it could narrow down a family lineage, tracing back to a potential identity. The cold case unit quickly partnered with a private lab, specializing in genealogical DNA. The markers from the scarf and hair were uploaded to GEDmatch, a database where millions of Americans voluntarily submit DNA to find relatives. The system sifted through hundreds of thousands of profiles, filtering gradually, and produced results, several distant matches at the third cousin level, relatives sharing a common ancestor 3 to 4 generations back. Though it didn't identify a specific person, this was an unprecedented breakthrough after 7 years of deadlock. In a report to Command, the cold case lead noted, DNA markers provide a foundation for genealogical search, not yet sufficient to identify a suspect, but opens the possibility of narrowing down a family tree. Recommend forming a team combining genealogists and investigators. For the first time since 2008, Lucia Butler's file was labeled Active Investigation. The media immediately reported that CPD had officially reopened the case. The Butler family, accustomed to disappointment, was cautiously hopeful. Lucia's mother appeared on WGN9's Evening News, voice-breaking. "If technology can give us a name, even a distant relative, it's what we've waited 7 years for." Within CPD, the atmosphere shifted. Instead of a forgotten cold case, Lucia Butler was now the focus of a modern effort, combining STR mix, genealogical DNA, and pressure from online communities. Each genetic marker became a clue to build a family tree, and though initial results only pointed to distant relatives in Ohio, Indiana, and Wisconsin, investigators knew they finally had a path out of the darkness. With strong DNA markers for a genealogical search, the cold case unit knew they needed another piece to narrow the scope. The Facebook photo from Lincoln Hall had opened a lead, but the old CTA Belmont video, the last visual evidence of Lucia alive, was critical. In 2016, CPD collaborated with an image analysis team from Northwestern University, using AI-based image enhancement, just emerging in criminal investigations. The blurry, shaky 2008 footage was processed through frame restoration software, stitching thousands of pixels to reconstruct details. Machine learning was trained on similar-era CTA videos to accurately estimate how dim yellow lighting and camera angles affected image clarity. When the first enhanced version appeared on screen, the team held their breath. The figure, once a mere dark green blur, now clearly wore a sports jacket with a bright Cubs logo on the left chest. The young man's face beside Lucia, previously a vague shape, was sharp enough for comparison. Facial recognition software cross-checked it against Illinois driver's license databases and student photos from local universities. After 3 days, a result emerged: Ryan Mitchell, born 1987, uptown Chicago resident. Further enhanced video frames were analyzed. One showed Mitchell with 2 other young men, all walking faster than Lucia, occasionally glancing back. In one moment, fluorescent light caught Mitchell's face, showing him speaking while Lucia seemed to keep her distance. Though silent, this interaction supported the theory of an argument overheard by the resident near the station at 1 a.m. The technical report to CPD concluded, video enhancement positively identifies one male subject as Ryan Mitchell. Subject appears in multiple frames accompanying missing person Butler, Lucia. This constitutes strong lead for suspect witness classification. For the first time in nearly a decade, Lucia Butler's case had a real name, a real face, and a concrete investigative direction. Still, the team remained cautious. They didn't label Mitchell a suspect immediately, noting in the file, subject of interest. They needed further evidence, especially a link between Mitchell and the recently analyzed DNA markers. But one thing was certain: thanks to AI, footage once deemed useless had become a pivotal weapon, pulling Lucia Butler's case from its frozen state. When Ryan Mitchell's name surfaced from the enhanced video analysis, the cold case unit dove into his background. They first accessed university databases around Chicago. Records showed Mitchell attended Loyola University Chicago from fall 2006, majoring in psychology, but abruptly dropped out in spring 2009, months after Lucia's disappearance. Academic notes listed multiple unexplained absences and declining grades throughout 2008. His dropout shortly after the incident raised red flags. Next, they checked his legal history. Mitchell had no major convictions, but several minor infractions. A 2007 bars fight in Wrigleyville, resulting in a fine and warning. 2 public intoxication disturbances in 2008 and 2010. Reports described him as frequently drunk and quick-tempered, but never criminally prosecuted. Still, investigators knew these small traces could reflect a pattern of latent violence, especially concerning given Lucia's disappearance after a night at a bar. A chilling detail emerged when reviewing 2008 witness interviews. In a faded report, a Clark Street resident had said they might recognize one of the 3 young men with Lucia as a Lincoln Hall regular, named Ryan or Brian something. At the time, investigators didn't pursue it, lacking sufficient data, and with Ryan Mitchell not on any suspect list. The report was filed as insufficient information. Now, with technology confirming Ryan as the Cubs jacket wearer in the video, this oversight became a painful wound for officers who worked the original case. In internal meetings, Ryan Mitchell's file was placed beside Lucia's timeline. November 2008, Lucia vanished. Video showed Mitchell at Belmont Station. Early 2009, he dropped out of Loyola. Afterward, he had minor violent incidents, lived unstably, and moved frequently. Though no direct evidence yet, the picture grew clearer. Mitchell wasn't just a subject of interest, but was becoming the primary suspect. Cold case investigators noted in their report, Ryan Mitchell was present with the victim in her final known time frame. Academic and social behavior shows signs of instability. Recommend prioritizing DNA sample comparison with 2008 evidence. After nearly a decade, Lucia Butler's case finally had a clear target to pursue. In early 2018, 10 years after Lucia Butler's disappearance, her case emerged from cold status. Results from enhanced video analysis and prior DNA markers placed Ryan Mitchell at the center of the file. However, in law, suspicion isn't enough for charges. Police needed undeniable proof. There was only one way: obtain Mitchell's current DNA and compare it to the 2008 evidence. Ryan Mitchell was living in a quiet Naperville apartment complex, a western Chicago suburb. Records showed he moved there in 2016, renting a 3rd-floor unit in an old building. Unremarkable. He worked odd jobs for a small construction company. Low pay, no significant credit history. Mitchell lived alone, had no public girlfriend, and rarely interacted with neighbors. With a mild demeanor and routine work-home schedule, he blended into the neighborhood. But to the cold case unit, every move warranted scrutiny. A covert surveillance team was formed, rotating outside his complex. They noted his old Honda Civic's license plate, daily work routine, and frequent stops. A pattern emerged. Nearly every morning, Mitchell visited a nearby Starbucks for coffee, lingering for about 10 minutes with earbuds before leaving his paper cup on the table or in the trash by the door. This was the opportunity investigators awaited. Legally, police could collect items a suspect discarded in public without a warrant. One March 2018 morning, as Mitchell left Starbucks, an undercover officer entered. On the table, a paper cup still steamed, stained with coffee and a few hairs on the plastic lid. As a barista moved to clear it, the officer flashed a badge, requesting it be preserved for sealing. The cup was placed into an evidence bag as nearby customers looked on in surprise. The evidence was rushed to the lab. DNA technicians carefully sampled the cup's rim, straw, and lid hairs. When the initial data appeared on screen, they knew they were at a turning point. A week later, a nearly 20-page report reached the cold case unit. The bolded line on the first page silenced the team before erupting in cheers. DNA profile obtained from Starbucks cup is a complete match with DNA sample collected from scarf of victim Butler, Lucia, 2008. The confidence level was 1 in 6.8 trillion, virtually no chance of error. Ryan Mitchell had touched Lucia Butler's red scarf the night she vanished. With this evidence, a decade of theories and suspicions converged on one conclusion: he wasn't just coincidentally present, but directly linked to the victim. The cold case meeting room buzzed with mixed emotions. Younger investigators were thrilled to witness a cold case cracked by modern DNA technology. Those from the 2008 investigation were choked up, knowing a single oversight had let Ryan slip through for a decade. A veteran officer whispered, "This trash cup did what we waited 10 years for." In the report to CPD leadership, the lead investigator wrote, "DNA match confirms Ryan Mitchell was in direct contact with victims' belongings. Evidence collected legally through abandoned property. Recommendation: prepare arrest warrant." With that, Ryan Mitchell was officially labeled the primary suspect in Lucia Butler's disappearance. To the Butler family, news of the DNA match was a double-edged sword. It sparked hope for justice while reopening a wound they thought had dulled. For CPD, it was a pivotal moment. From a discarded cup, they had evidence strong enough to move the case to a decisive phase, preparing to request Ryan Mitchell's arrest warrant. After the lab confirmed the Starbucks cup DNA perfectly matched the sample from Lucia Butler's red scarf, the cold case unit knew they had solid legal evidence. However, to secure an arrest warrant, prosecutors wanted additional pieces to strengthen the case in court. Amid the team's urgent preparations, an unexpected opportunity arose from the past. A former Loyola University student, who studied with Ryan Mitchell, contacted police after reading local news about progress in the Lucia Butler case. He recounted that during a 2009 drinking session, months after Lucia's disappearance, a drunk Ryan blurted out a chilling comment: "There was a girl who never made it home that night." At the time, no one understood who he meant, dismissing it as a drunk's foolish remark. But seeing Ryan's name tied to the case in 2018, the memory returned vividly, prompting him to come forward. Police quickly arranged a discreet meeting with the witness, fully recorded and procedurally compliant. The man detailed the scene. Ryan sat at the table's corner, heavily drunk, voice slurred. The comment came during a discussion about recent missing person cases in the news, silencing the table briefly before they brushed it off as a joke. The witness admitted he hadn't thought much of it until the Lucia Butler case resurfaced. This testimony not only reinforced the theory of Ryan's involvement, but showed he had made incriminating remarks early on, when no one suspected him. Investigators cross-checked the testimony with the case timeline. In 2009, Ryan dropped out of Loyola, cut ties with many contacts, and lived nomadically. The girl who never made it home perfectly aligned with the fact Lucia vanished on November 14, 2008, and was never seen returning to her Belmont Avenue apartment. The internal report noted, "Independent witness, unrelated to victim's family. Testimony consistent with timeline. Valuable as supplementary evidence for DNA." To ensure legal validity, police had the witness sign a detailed statement, including a commitment to testify if needed. The prosecutor valued this information, calling it the human piece, indirect evidence of the suspect's knowledge and words, complementing the cold scientific proof. Ryan Mitchell's file grew thicker. Enhanced video showed him with Lucia in her final moments. DNA from the scarf matched the Starbucks sample, and now a former classmate's testimony revealed Ryan had inadvertently disclosed his knowledge. Alone, each piece might lack weight. Together, they painted a vivid picture of the man who walked into the darkness with Lucia Butler 10 years prior. In a late June 2018 meeting, the cold case lead concluded, "With DNA match video enhancement and witness testimony, we have a complete file. recommend requesting a court warrant to arrest Ryan Mitchell." The room fell silent for a moment, then nodded in unison. After a decade of fruitless pursuit, the final piece had fallen into place, turning a once obscure name from the 2008 file into the official suspect in a crime that haunted Chicago for 10 years. With Ryan Mitchell's file bolstered by DNA and the old witness testimony, the prosecutor requested CPD bring in an FBI behavioral analyst to build a psychological profile, helping the court understand motive and method. In summer 2018, Special Agent Laura Kim, a veteran profiler from Quantico, was dispatched to Chicago to review all evidence. She began by examining Mitchell's life timeline, from his Loyola University days to his dropout, frequent moves, and erratic employment. Kim concluded that Mitchell didn't fit the profile of a long-term, calculated killer. Instead, his history, bar fights, minor assaults, heavy drinking, suggested a pattern of impulsive violence. He wasn't a meticulous criminal, but acted on emotion and circumstance. Lucia's disappearance, after a late-night bar outing, fit this pattern: a chance encounter, alcohol lowering inhibitions, and a situation spiraling out of control. Kim wrote in her report, "Ryan Mitchell fits the model of opportunistic offender. Alcohol likely played a significant role. Subject had no documented history of premeditated crimes, but displayed consistent patterns of impulsivity and aggression when intoxicated." Mitchell acted like an opportunistic predator, seizing the moment when he saw a young woman alone at night, then resorting to violence when faced with resistance. Another key part of the analysis was his responsibility avoidance behavior. After Lucia's disappearance, Mitchell dropped out of Loyola, severed ties, and moved repeatedly. To the profiler, these were typical of an opportunistic offender, unable to perfectly cover tracks. He chose to disappear from familiar settings to reduce detection risk. This instability wasn't a sign of a cunning plan, but clumsy survival instinct. The FBI also compared Mitchell's behavior to similar cases in the Chicago area from that period. Several sexual assault cases outside bars showed a common pattern: young men, intoxicated, acting impulsively, leaving little evidence beyond vague witness accounts or stray fabric fibers. Mitchell fit this profile almost perfectly. The profiler further analyzed the statement, "There was a girl who never made it home that night." It wasn't a direct confession, but a half-joking remark, typical of someone carrying a psychological burden. Such individuals often let slip comments in alcohol-fueled settings, testing listeners' reactions while partially unburdening their secret. That Mitchell made this remark just months after the disappearance reinforced the assessment that he lacked the skill to suppress emotions or maintain a long-term cover-up, another trait of an impulsive offender. The FBI's final report to CPD concluded, "Subject is unlikely to be serial in nature, but demonstrates opportunistic aggression triggered by alcohol. He represents a situational threat rather than a calculated predator." This behavioral profile aligns with forensic evidence and witness testimony. The prosecutor viewed the report as a critical addition. It explained to the court why Mitchell, with no major criminal history, could be involved in such a serious crime. His impulsiveness, opportunism, and alcohol influence all aligned with the context of Lucia Butler's disappearance after leaving Lincoln Hall. With this behavioral profile, the picture of Ryan Mitchell was nearly complete. Not a cold-blooded mastermind, but an unstable young man, driven by alcohol and circumstance into an irreversible act. In the eyes of justice, this didn't lessen his responsibility. It proved Lucia Butler's death resulted from senseless violence, a painful testament to the danger of opportunistic offenders. After the FBI profiler's behavioral report was added, the cold case unit knew they had a comprehensive set of evidence, matching DNA, enhanced video, old witness testimony, and a behavioral analysis pointing to an opportunistic criminal. All were compiled into a 300-page report, with appendices including sealed evidence logs, a detailed timeline from 12:40 to 1:20 a.m. on November 15, 2008, and comparisons of CTA video footage and Ryan Mitchell's identification photo. In June 2018, the lead investigator formally submitted the report to Cook County Court, requesting an arrest warrant for Ryan Mitchell on charges of first-degree murder and concealing a body. In a closed hearing, the prosecutor presented key evidence to the judge. DNA from Lucia Butler's red scarf perfectly matched samples from Mitchell's Starbucks cup. 2008 CTA video, enhanced by AI, confirmed Mitchell walking beside Lucia in her final moments. A former classmate's testimony that Ryan said there was a girl who never made it home that night. And the FBI profiler's report showing impulsive behavior consistent with the crime's circumstances. Together, they formed a tight, nearly irrefutable chain of logic. The judge listened to each point, cross-referencing the file. After nearly 2 hours of deliberation, he signed the arrest warrant. The brief text, "Arrest warrant granted, Ryan Mitchell, June 2018, marked the most significant milestone since Lucia Butler's disappearance. With that signature, a decade-long cold case officially transitioned to a criminal prosecution. Immediately, CPD coordinated with a SWAT team to plan the arrest. They didn't want to take risks, as Mitchell could react unpredictably or destroy digital evidence. The plan was meticulous at 5 a.m. on June 21, 2018. When Mitchell was likely still asleep, the tactical team would approach his Naperville apartment. Simultaneously, a digital forensics team stood ready to seize computers, hard drives, and phones to ensure no data was erased. That morning, the quiet apartment complex erupted. Mitchell's door was pounded with shouts of Chicago police. "Open up!" Inside, a dazed Mitchell woke, barely reacting before the door was unlocked with specialized equipment. He was handcuffed on his bed as police read the arrest warrant aloud. There was no resistance, but his eyes showed confusion and fear, as if a decade of hiding in the shadows had finally collapsed. Meanwhile, technicians swiftly confiscated devices: an old Dell laptop, 2 external hard drives, and an outdated iPhone. All were sealed on site, logged, and sent to the Digital Analysis Lab. The arrest was executed cleanly in under 15 minutes. But for investigators who had pursued the case for years, it felt like a lifetime. As the police van left Naperville, transporting Mitchell to Cook County headquarters, the cold case unit buzzed with relief. A young investigator whispered, "Finally, Lucia has a voice." But all knew this was just the start of another journey, one where their painstakingly gathered evidence would face scrutiny in court against defense attorneys and the harsh glare of public opinion. The computers and phones seized from Mitchell's Naperville apartment were quickly transferred to CPD's Digital Forensics Lab. From the start, investigators knew that any 2008 related traces in these devices could be crucial supplementary evidence. The old Dell laptop's hard drive still held undeleted data. Digital forensics experts extracted all content, recovering files from the recycle bin and hidden folders. Days later, they found a series of archived emails in Ryan's old account, time-stamped late November 2008. One unsent draft, with a vague subject line, contained search terms like "how to hide a body" and "Chicago Forest Preserve's night access." This evidence stunned the team. The phrase "how to hide a body" was the kind of query prosecutors could use to prove post-crime preparation. It reflected not just panic, but specific actions by Ryan in the days after Lucia's disappearance. The email copy was printed, chain of custody verified, and added to the file as critical evidence. But there was more. In a deeply hidden photo folder, experts found files from an old phone backed up to the computer. Some, with metadata dated November 16, 2008, just 2 days after the disappearance, showed nighttime shots in a dense forest, with scattered dry leaves and a flash illuminating the dark. Though blurry, the images showed oddly stacked logs and ground that appeared freshly disturbed. GPS data embedded in the photos pointed to Cook County Forest Preserves, a vast wooded area northwest of Chicago. As the team pieced it together, the picture clarified. In November 2008, Ryan Mitchell appeared in CTA footage with Lucia. Days later, he searched for body concealment methods and photographed the forest preserves. These digital findings became strong circumstantial evidence of intent to dispose of a body. Additionally, experts recovered partially deleted files from the hard drive, including a short note with the phrase "no one will find her." Though the context was unclear, it deepened suspicion. On the old iPhone, they restored 2009 browsing history showing discussions about unsolved Chicago murders, a behavior common among offenders obsessed with monitoring their own crimes while trying to cover them. The digital forensics lead wrote in the report to prosecutors, "Recovered evidence from Mitchell's laptop includes unsent email drafts referencing body disposal, photographs dated November 2008 in Cook County Forest Preserves, and text fragments consistent with concealment attempts. Digital evidence strongly corroborates suspects' involvement in disappearance of Butler, Lucia." For the team, this was the breakthrough they'd awaited for over a decade. DNA proved Ryan's direct contact with Lucia's belongings. Enhanced video showed him with her in her final moments. Witness testimony revealed his slip about a girl who never made it home. Now, digital evidence exposed another layer. Ryan had sought to hide a body and visited the exact forest where Lucia's remains would later be found. This made the prosecution's case nearly airtight. The evidence was no longer scattered, but formed a continuous chain from the night of the disappearance to subsequent actions. In a final meeting, the prosecutor declared, "With the newly discovered digital data, we have enough to charge Ryan Mitchell not only with first-degree murder, but also with concealing a body and obstructing justice." The old hard drives Mitchell kept, seemingly harmless, became the most damning evidence. For the Butler family, learning police found photos from the forest preserves meant the truth about where Lucia vanished was finally emerging. When the nighttime photos from Ryan Mitchell's old hard drive, pinpointing Cook County Forest Preserves, were recovered, the team knew they had to act immediately. A judge approved a search warrant, allowing police and forensics to excavate the forest area photographed in November 2008. Early July 2018 morning, dozens of specialized vehicles entered the preserve. Police sealed off entrances, set up barriers, and posted crime scene, "Do not enter" signs. Tension enveloped the forest, where dense trees blocked sunlight and wind rustled through dry leaves. Forensic experts spread out maps, matching photo details to the terrain, stacked rotten logs, thick bushes, patchy ground. About 200 meters in, they found a perfectly matching site. The soil showed signs of being dug up and covered with leaves and branches under high-powered lights. Technicians marked the area, strung cord, and photographed the scene before excavating. Layers of earth were carefully removed with small shovels and soft brushes. The damp soil smell filled the humid air. Within an hour, a technician shouted, "Found something." All eyes turned. Amid dark soil, faint white bone fragments emerged. They were gently brushed, revealing a curled human skeleton wrapped in rotted fabric. Nearby, in a soil pocket, a black women's handbag appeared, heavily damaged but recognizable. Inside, forensics found personal items, a lipstick, keys, and crucially, a silver ring engraved with L.B. Lucia Butler's initials. The entire scene was meticulously photographed, each item sealed in evidence bags, labeled, and logged. The skeleton was placed in a temporary wooden coffin, covered with white cloth, and sent to the Illinois State Medical Examiner's office. No one spoke. A heavy silence hung as the van carrying the remains left the forest. DNA results, announced 2 weeks later, compared samples from Lucia Butler's parents and confirmed unequivocally the remains were hers, missing since November 14, 2008. The report noted bone trauma, suggesting possible violence, though a decade of decomposition made pinpointing the exact cause of death difficult. When the news reached the Butler family, Lucia's mother broke down in a brief press conference. "We've waited 10 years to bring our daughter home." Legally, this was a pivotal turning point from a mysterious disappearance. The case became a confirmed homicide with an identified victim. Physical evidence, bones, handbag, silver ring, combined with perfect DNA matches, locked Ryan Mitchell to the digital data found on his computer. The scene summary report stated, "Human remains located at Cook County Forest Preserves correspond to Butler Lucia. Personal belongings confirm victim identity. Discovery provides physical corroboration to digital evidence recovered from suspect's laptop." With this, the evidence chain was complete, from cameras, DNA, witness testimony, digital data, to the victim's remains. A decade of darkness ended in a somber forest scene, where a small silver ring proved that truth, though buried, could finally be unearthed. After DNA testing confirmed the Cook County Forest Preserve's remains as Lucia Butler's, the entire file was sent to the Cook County Prosecutor's Office. On a desk piled with documents, lead prosecutor Marlene Hayes knew her duty was to ensure every piece of evidence maintained an unbroken chain of custody. Any small error, from sealing bone bags to logging evidence dates, could be exploited by defense attorneys in court. Hayes convened all investigators, forensic technicians, and evidence custodians to review procedures. Every evidence bag was rechecked for labels, signatures, and timestamps, cross-referenced with storage logs. All matched, from the 2008 red scarf to the 2018 handbag. With the chain of custody secured, prosecutors began weaving the evidence into a cohesive narrative. They built a visual timeline, Lincoln Hall footage showing Lucia leaving at 12:40 a.m., the Facebook photo from the bar with Ryan Mitchell in the background, the taxi driver's testimony about the Cubs jacket, CTA Belmont video showing Lucia with 3 young men, one in a Cubs jacket. All led to the final point, the CTA station, where Lucia's phone went offline at 1:19 a.m. Next was physical evidence. Ryan's DNA matched fabric on the red scarf. The chain was presented as a straight line, scarf 2008 DNA sample stored, 2018 retesting match. Forensic analysis of the remains confirmed Lucia's identity and found signs of trauma. Digital evidence solidified everything, a 2008 email about how to hide a body from Ryan's IP-linked account. Photos from Cook County Forest matching the later excavation site. Another key element was witness testimony. The former classmate recounted Ryan's remark, "There was a girl who never made it home that night." The recorded interview, procedurally verified, became critical circumstantial evidence of guilty knowledge. The FBI profiler's report showed Ryan's impulsive alcohol-fueled violence aligning with the crime scenario. In internal meetings, Hayes demanded the evidence be presented in a clamped format, bookended by Lucia. Start: the victim leaving the bar on a winter night. End: her remains found with her handbag and silver ring. In between, an unbroken chain of video, data, DNA, witnesses, and testimony formed a picture no jury could dismiss. Prosecutors also anticipated defense counterarguments. The defense might claim Ryan was coincidentally with friends, that the 2008 scarf DNA was contaminated, or that digital data didn't prove murder. To counter, Hayes called an Illinois State Police forensic expert as an expert witness to explain testing procedures and near-zero error rates. A digital expert would clarify that recovered photos and emails had metadata, impossible to fake. Every detail was drafted into the indictment. It described Ryan Mitchell approaching Lucia Butler on November 15, 2008, near the CTA Belmont station, using coercion or deceit to lure her away, then killing and hiding her body in Cook County Forest. Primary charge: first-degree murder, with additional charges of kidnapping and evidence destruction. When the completed indictment landed on the desk, Hayes read the final line: "The people of the state of Illinois versus Ryan Mitchell." After 10 years, the case was airtight, with no gaps for dismissal. A major trial loomed, and everything was ready. On the trial's opening day, Cook County Courtroom 305 was packed. 10 years after Lucia Butler's fateful disappearance, her family sat in the victim's row, facing Ryan Mitchell, the man accused of taking their daughter's life. Prosecutor Marlene Hayes opened with a tight presentation. She rebuilt the timeline from Lucia's 12:40 a.m. exit from Lincoln Hall to her final CTA Belmont image at 1:15 a.m. On a large screen, Hayes displayed the 2008 red scarf, AI-enhanced video, and recovered email pages with how to hide a body searches. She asserted the evidence chain, video, witnesses, DNA, digital data, and remains, tied Ryan Mitchell to the crime undeniably. The defense attorney rose, objecting fiercely. He argued the 2008 scarf DNA could be contaminated from storage, that a 10-year-old fabric can't be decisive evidence. He also tried convincing the jury that Ryan was merely with friends at Belmont Station, and the Facebook photo and witness testimony were coincidences. To counter, the prosecution called an Illinois State Police forensics expert to the stand. The doctor detailed evidence preservation, chain of custody signatures, and STR mix and genealogical DNA testing. He concluded the odds of Ryan's DNA, matching the scarf sample from a different source, were 1 in billions. When Hayes asked, "Is there a chance of error in the testing process?" the expert replied firmly, "No. If there is, it's so low it's practically inapplicable." The jury listened intently as the Butler family's tense gazes fixed on the defendant. Ryan Mitchell sat hunched, occasionally whispering to his lawyer, showing no emotion before the evidence displayed. The prosecution also called Ryan's former classmate, who recounted hearing him say, "There was a girl who never made it home that night." The recorded testimony played in court, deepening the heavy atmosphere. As closing arguments ended, Hayes delivered a chilling final line. "Lucia Butler spent 10 years beneath the earth in Cook County Forest. Only one person led her there. That person sits before you today." After 4 days of deliberation, the jury returned. All stood as the judge asked, "Have you reached a verdict?" The foreman replied, "We have." In a breathless room he read aloud, "We find the defendant Ryan Mitchell guilty of first-degree murder." Sobs erupted from the victim's row. Lucia's mother buried her face in her hands. Ryan showed no emotion, but his hands trembled as the judge pronounced, "Life imprisonment without parole." The judge emphasized, "This crime stole a young woman's life, leaving a decade of grief. This sentence reflects its severity and ensures justice is never forgotten." As the trial concluded, the media outside the courthouse erupted. After a decade, Chicago's mysterious disappearance case was finally closed with a life sentence. The Butler family, though they could never bring Lucia back, at least had answers. The Chicago community, once haunted by the 2008 disappearance, now saw the perpetrator punished. The trial ended, but its echoes lingered. After Ryan Mitchell was sentenced to life without parole, Chicago's major newspapers splashed headlines, "Justice for Lucia Butler," 10 years later. The city sighed in relief, but was shaken. To neighbors and former colleagues, Ryan was just an ordinary young man, a former college student, part-time supermarket worker, unremarkable except for minor scuffles. The shock came from realizing the killer wasn't a shadowy figure, but a familiar face blending into everyday life. Chicagoans began debating, without new DNA technology, without persistent internet sleuths dissecting old photos, would Ryan ever have been brought to light? On local television, forensic experts emphasized that the Lucia Butler case was a landmark for Illinois' cold case investigations. The 2008 DNA sample, too weak for results back then, became the key with STR mix and genealogical DNA a decade later. It proved no evidence is meaningless if preserved properly. Every fiber, every skin cell can wait years to spark a breakthrough. Concurrently, the role of internet sleuths was hotly discussed. Reddit's online community unearthed the old Facebook photo, reigniting attention and pressuring Chicago PD to reopen the case. A communications student commented, "We don't replace the police, but we keep cases from being forgotten." Lucia's case became a textbook example in criminology classes. Online community pressure, when directed correctly, can powerfully motivate law enforcement. For the Butler family, the verdict was both solace and sorrow. They knew Lucia wouldn't return, but the truth had surfaced. At a memorial at DePaul University, friends and professors read her name as a symbol for victims forgotten in cold case files. Her mother said, "If a blurry photo and a tiny DNA sample can turn justice around, no case should be deemed hopeless." Legally, the Lucia Butler case set a precedent. Cook County Court accepted genealogical DNA, digital data, and social media witness testimony as a valid framework. This paved the way for dozens of other cold cases to be reopened. Prosecutors in nearby states like Wisconsin and Indiana began studying Lucia's file to apply similar strategies. In the community, the case sparked a lingering fear anyone around could be a hidden offender. Ryan was once seen as an ordinary guy, and that was what haunted people. Public discussions about personal safety, especially for young women in Chicago, surged. Bars near Lincoln Hall installed more cameras, increased security staff, and urged women not to walk home alone. Culturally, Lucia Butler's story entered popular true crime podcasts. It was both chilling and inspiring, proving justice could be delayed but not lost. In one episode, the host said, "One DNA sample, one blurry photo, and 10 years of patience defeated the silence of time." The quote spread on social media as a new mantra for cold case followers. At the policy level, Illinois increased funding for the cold case unit and expanded partnerships with private labs specializing in genealogical DNA. A community fund, the Lucia Project, was established to support victims' families in tracking unresolved cases. Still, some raised concerns. Human rights activists questioned privacy issues with tracing citizen DNA through genealogical databases, warning of potential misuse. But most Chicagoans, after witnessing Lucia's case, believe justice outweighed those risks. A decade later, the community finally had answers for that cold November night in 2008. Lucia Butler's name became a reminder: never underestimate a small piece of evidence. More than that, it proved that combining advanced forensic technology with persistent community effort could transform a system. The Lucia Butler case closed, but its legacy opened doors for other victims, for families still waiting, and for a justice system that never stops seeking truth. Lucia Butler's story didn't end with Ryan Mitchell's life sentence. It illuminated how technology, community, and perseverance can shift justice in America today. A red scarf left near Lincoln Hall, seemingly meaningless in 2008, became decisive evidence a decade later thanks to STR mix and genealogical DNA. This reminds us that in modern life, where data and traces surround us, every detail deserves respect and preservation, from old emails, blurry Facebook photos, to CTA station security footage. The lesson is that truth may be buried by time, but justice endures if society leverages scientific progress and relentless pursuit. The involvement of online communities, Reddit's R-Resolved Mysteries sleuths, who unearthed Lucia's old photo, shows the power of citizens in the digital age. We can aid authorities with attention, vigilance, and connectivity. In today's America, amid overwhelming information, it's vital not to ignore cries for help or cases deemed cold. Lucia Butler's case is both a warning about urban personal safety's fragility and a reminder that technology and community, used rightly, can restore voices to the silenced. For each of us, listening, sharing, and upholding fairness may ensure no one vanishes in silence. If you believe cold cases like Lucia Butler's deserve to be revisited and illuminated by truth, please subscribe to join us in the pursuit of justice. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video, where we'll continue unraveling mysteries yet untold.